We usually think of countries as one connected piece of land. You can drive from one city to another without ever leaving it. But one part of Russia is completely cut off from the rest of Russia. To get there, Russians must cross two foreign countries or fly over international airspace entirely. So how did one of the world's largest nations end up with a territory it can't even reach by road? This is Kaliningrad, and it might be the strangest, most dangerous piece of real estate in Europe. Kaliningrad sits wedged between Poland and Lithuania on the Baltic coast, closer to Berlin than to Moscow. It's home to roughly 1 million people, all of them Russian citizens, living in a Russian city, under Russian law, but the nearest actual Russian border is over 300 kilometers away, on the other side of two separate foreign countries. There's no bridge, no tunnel, no direct road that stays inside Russian territory the whole way. If you're a Russian citizen driving from Kaliningrad to St. Petersburg, you're leaving Russia to get to Russia. This wasn't always a Russian city. For nearly 700 years, it was German, a city called Königsberg, one of the great centers of Prussian and German culture. Home to the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who reportedly never traveled more than 10 miles from it in his entire life. Königsberg was devastated in the Second World War, heavily bombed by the Allies, then the site of a brutal, drawn-out siege by the Soviet Red Army in early 1945. When the war ended, the Allied powers met at the Potsdam Conference to redraw the map of defeated Germany. Stalin wanted a warm-water Baltic port that would never freeze over. Königsberg fit that need perfectly, and the Allies agreed to hand the northern part of German East Prussia to the Soviet Union. Most of the remaining German population was expelled or fled westward. The Soviet government resettled the city with citizens from across the USSR. In 1946, the city was renamed Kaliningrad, after Mikhail Kalinin, a Soviet statesman who, notably, had nothing to do with the region. For most of the Cold War, Kaliningrad was a closed military city. Foreigners weren't allowed in at all, and it housed major Soviet naval and air bases. That changed almost overnight in 1991. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Lithuania declared independence, and suddenly the land connecting Kaliningrad to the rest of Russia belonged to a newly sovereign, foreign nation. Kaliningrad didn't move an inch, but the ground around it did. It went from being a well-connected Soviet military hub to being genuinely cut off, a Russian exclave stranded on the wrong side of a new international border. Today, getting from Kaliningrad to mainland Russia by land means crossing Lithuania, then Belarus, then finally re-entering Russia, or going around by ship or plane. Since Lithuania and Poland both joined NATO and the European Union in 2004, Kaliningrad has been surrounded entirely by alliance territory. It's the only piece of Russia that borders NATO on every side. This geography makes Kaliningrad one of the most militarily sensitive places in Europe. Western officials have long said Russia has stationed Iskander missile systems there. Systems capable of carrying nuclear warheads, though Russia has never officially confirmed whether the ones in Kaliningrad are nuclear-armed. It also remains home to Russia's Baltic Fleet. Right next to it lies the Suwałki Gap, a narrow strip of land, only around 60 to 100 kilometers wide. That is the only land connection between the Baltic states and the rest of NATO Europe. If that gap were ever cut, Kaliningrad and Belarus would together separate the Baltic states from the rest of the alliance. NATO planners consider it one of the most vulnerable points on the entire eastern frontier. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, tensions over Kaliningrad's supply line have flared repeatedly. Lithuania has periodically restricted the transit of EU-sanctioned goods through its territory. As of early to mid-2026, tensions have been rising again. Lithuania has run military drills simulating security incidents on transit trains, and officials have publicly discussed ending rail transit altogether. At the same time, Lithuania's state gas company signed a new 5-year agreement to keep transiting Russian gas to Kaliningrad through 2031, a sign that, alongside the rising rhetoric, day-to-day cooperation has continued. The full picture is still unfolding, so treat the current transit status as something to verify at the time of watching, not a fixed fact. Kaliningrad is a strange kind of time capsule, a piece of the Soviet Union's old strategic map that never got redrawn when the map around it changed. It's Russian not because of geography, but despite it. And it sits there today as a reminder that borders drawn to solve one era's problems can just as easily become the next era's flashpoint. A heavily armed island of one nation, permanently surrounded by another. If you found this as strange as I did, subscribe. There are more borders like this one still to come.